begins right now.
Good evening. First on Fox, two men on pins and needles tonight waiting for a supreme decision.
It's an uncomfortable place to be if you're George W. Bush or Al Gore. Both men running a race for one prize, the presidency. But the U.S. Supreme Court may have the final word. Fox 61's Grant Rampy has the latest on today's hearing before the country's highest court.
Well, some late hours for the justices tonight, but still no decision. They face the unenviable task of having to decide whether a lower court misread the law, whether one man's presidential hope should live or die, and they have to make up their minds in a hurry. As the hearing began this morning, protesters shouted their opinions. That's all he said. Don't take it personally. The court got right down to business, asking,
where's the federal question here?
Attorney Ted Olson laid out the Bush case that Florida's high court has twice tried to change election rules, that it's way overstepped its bounds.
The Florida Supreme Court issued a new, wholesale post-election revision of Florida's election law.
Gore attorney David Boies argued every vote should count, and the justices did have authority to weigh in.
The Florida Supreme Court has held that where a voter's intent can be discerned, even if they don't do what they're told, that's supposed to be counted.
But a few justices inquired, how could a recount be done, and what's the standard for deciding which votes count? Boies seemed stumped.
I think that's a very hard question.
Al Gore heard the proceedings on TV at home, as millions of us did. George Bush got a briefing on them from his team.
Nervous? You're pretty calm about that.
While in Florida today, state legislators moved a step closer to appointing their own slate of Bush electors, just in case the big questions aren't settled by midweek. On this momentous day, some levity in court. One of the Republican lawyers had a hard time keeping the justices straight.
Justice Barr, what I'm saying is that...
I'm Justice Souter. You better cut that out.
And listening to the questions, it is tough to tell in court today which direction the court is going to head. It could send the case back to Florida with some directions for restarting the recount process, or they could rule that it's unconstitutional. That would virtually hand the presidency to George Bush. A decision is expected tomorrow. Live in Washington, Grant Rampy, back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Grant. The players in this political drama don't know what to expect. Even Connecticut Senator Joseph Lieberman seems to sway back and forth on his opinion of the eventual outcome. The senator spoke with WTIC radio today and says he's prepared if things don't turn out his way.
I have written, at least 2 concession speeches in the one on election night, and then I was preparing on Friday, really.
Lieberman says despite the speeches, he is staying optimistic.
Dozens of activists protested in front of the federal building in Hartford this afternoon, calling for the Supreme Court to side with Gore. They sang, prayed, and spoke out against the possibility of thousands of votes being cast aside. One state representative says she feels sadness in the midst of what she considers the most dynamic time in political history. The activists think the Supreme Court is listening to the public outcry.
I believe that democracy is under attack in a way that it's never been before, and people are concerned with what the outcome is going to be.
The group included union, religious, and political leaders.
Dozens of Florida voters are also putting in their 2 cents on the election deadlock. The NAACP backed a protest rally in Miami today. Folks there want the Supreme Court to allow recounts to continue. The crowd also complained about problems minority voters allegedly had on Election Day, claiming they were blocked from casting their ballots. The Justice Department is investigating. Just one of the many legal experts watching the Supreme Court's actions very closely is a Quinnipiac University law professor who used to work for the High Court.
Fox 61's Lynn Jolicoeur joins us live with his reaction to today's events. Lynn.
Well, Brent, Stephen Gilles used to work as a clerk for Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. She's one of the justices that attorneys originally considered to be a swing vote. But Gilles says he doesn't think things will swing Gore's way.
It brings back old times with a vengeance, and I wish I could be there. Taking notes on my legal pad and putting my 2 cents in with Justice O'Connor.
If this happened 15 years ago, Stephen Gilles would have been there. The now law professor at Quinnipiac University clerked for Justice Sandra Day O'Connor in 1985. Today, he had to settle for reviewing the court proceedings online.
I don't think there were any big surprises. Justice O'Connor and Justice Kennedy both appeared very troubled.
That is, by George W. Bush's claim, the Florida Supreme Court violated Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution when it ordered the manual recounts.
What if the Florida Supreme Court, in its interpretation of Florida's election laws, really got carried away and ended up reworking and reshaping those laws.
Laws the state legislature creates under a constitutional grant of power to govern presidential elections in the state. Gilles thinks Bush has less of a chance of succeeding on his equal protection claim because the legislature didn't set one single standard for evaluating questionable ballots. He says Gore's team did well on that issue.
Boyd made a powerful argument that the Constitution and the Equal Protection Clause doesn't require perfect consistency. As he pointed out, just the fact that you have different machines in different counties with different error rates. And sometimes, you know, eating pieces, one is more likely to eat your ballot than another. That is treating people unequally, and yet nobody claims that that violates the Constitution.
Gilles says he thinks the court will rule 5-4 in favor of Bush the same way it did over the weekend. And he says the court could order Florida to go back to the numbers from the first machine recount, which along with absentee ballots that have so far been counted would put Bush up by about 1,000 votes.
All right, and we'll see if Stephen Gilles is right.
Right.
All right, Lynn, thanks very much.
So here is the bottom line on this ever-changing election deadlock. There's no word tonight on when the Supreme Court will make its decision on the disputed ballots. If the Supreme Court overrules Florida's High Court, it will mark the end of the Florida recount fight and give the White House to Bush. More than 2,000 overseas ballots cast mostly by Florida's sailors and soldiers will now be counted. A federal appeals court has rejected a challenge to stop that count. Be sure and stay tuned to Fox 61 for continuing coverage of the election deadlock. Well, besides the election, we are closely watching some potentially wild weather moving into Connecticut tomorrow.
And before we show you what the storm has done in other places, we're going to go now to Fox 61's chief meteorologist, Justin Kiefer, for a look at what we can expect. Justin.
Brent and Susan, we have some really wild weather. You put it right on the money there with what's coming our way. We have calm before the storm right now, but back to our west, here is the storm, a mixture of heavy rain, heavy sleet, and heavy snow, a blizzard warning in effect for southern Michigan. But the story with this storm is not going to be snow for us tomorrow. It will be wind. Let me show you what computer models are projecting with this area of low pressure. As it moves across western New York, the pressure gradient, the difference in pressure from low to high, will be so tight over Connecticut that winds will be in excess of 50 miles per hour. There's potential for tree limbs down, which could cause, obviously, some power outages. And temperatures will be near 50 in the morning, and by Wednesday morning, could be in the single digits with wind chills of 20 below. And on top of that, we have